Good morning, everybody. This is Penny, and this is Through Glass Eyes. This morning we have Miss Crystal Burke joining us from Maine, and she's going to share our story. And Miss Crystal, I just want to thank you again for being so brave and willing to come on and share your story and everything that you're doing. Um, you'll hear her story, but her adventure has been a little bit different. She started early on, and I'm very grateful that she comes on today to share with us. Miss Crystal, thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Miss Crystal, can you tell us about how were you prior to your infection? What type of person were you at that time?
Um, well, what I'm seeing through speaking with lots of folks in the community is like many of us, I'm a type A personality, go-getter, doing a little bit of everything. I've long said since I was a kid that if I could figure out how to be Michelangelo and get paid for it, I would. I just need to find a king to fund me going off in all sorts of directions and learning everything. That was my goal from childhood, is literally to learn everything I possibly could about everything. So just about every hobby I have picked up and tried. I worked in veterinary medicine for over a decade. Um, we had I have a small farm. It's down several animals from where it used to be. And it's had to pare back more and more as I've run out of the energy for it. But health wise, what I have three little kids, and we used to take them hiking several miles a couple of times a summer, and we were working up to try to take them on a backpacking trip. Um, and this is with them being 2 and 3 years old for my youngest. Um, and we we're hoping to get horses again and basically do a horseback riding backpacking trip across the country. And like I said, small farm, so chores every day. I used to play soccer. I played at one point three different teams at the same time and would literally run 2 hours in one practice, run across town 14 miles and do another practice. And like I just never stopped. And like at medical appointments would get told my heart rate and blood pressure were incredibly low. Was I a triathlete or a marathon runner or something? And it's no, I just don't know how to stop. I often, like my typical sleep schedule was 4 to 6 hours, but I could get away with three and still wake up refreshed and ready to go and run about my day. Um, I work in a genetics research lab now. Um, I'm someone who's incredibly intelligent, was often treated as a walking encyclopedia. Like anybody who wants to know anything would come and ask me. And that doesn't work so well nowadays. But like I was basically the everything I could possibly be and do, I was doing at all times.
Absolutely. And I understand that too. I was a lab tech. I was a substitute teacher. I coached soccer for 10 years. So I have that love for soccer too, but I coach my kids. And I was never stopped. I didn't know what it was like to relax because it was an option, but it wasn't me. So I completely understand. And Miss Crystal, let's go to the time that you got infected. And I know you answered this outside of our our video. How many times have you had COVID?
I've only ever had COVID once. Like I said, I had a background in veterinary medicine, and I actually was part of the original pandemic planning um, cohort in my local region when I lived in Washington, Idaho area. And so it was a presidential initiative originally set up under President Bush, where we were assuming flu at the time to become a worldwide pandemic and to possibly shut everything down so that we would have to figure out how to give people payments so that they could stay in their homes, how to ship food to people's doors. So there was a collaboration. And since I was in grad school working on large animal vet med, working with ranchers and farmers to figure out like how they would still get their crops harvested and shipped out to people so that everyone in this country could get food and stay in affordable housing. and still have mail and stuff go out if we had to basically do some sort of a lockdown. Um, and all of that was slowly being dismantled in the first Trump administration. And so I was watching that fall apart before COVID ever hit. Um, so we actually had a coronavirus mutation when I lived out there that killed off 50% of our canine patients. So I was on the watch for something like this to happen. They were able to alter the vaccine for dogs in our area and get that variant covered, and we stopped it. Um, but when the announcement occurred that we had a coronavirus mutation and that it seemed to be causing large-scale deaths in China, I was already prepared and was masking my family. My oldest child has Down syndrome, and basically any respiratory infection is likely to send her to the hospital struggling to breathe, and had nearly killed her multiple times. And in November 2019, she got sick with what all of her classmates experienced as just a runny nose and ended up in the ER again. And the doctor said, you just can't let her get sick anymore. She just can't get sick. And so do everything you can. And we moved to a new school who said that they would do what they could to protect her. Um, but Friday the 13th, March 2020, we headed down to the nearest hospital to get a pre-op surgical check done on her. We wore masks, but had to take them off so that she could get her airways scoped. Um, and turns out that doctor ended up in the ICU for several months afterwards. And the next day, that hospital system announced that they had a massive outbreak. Um, and so I was potentially one of the first cases in the state of Maine. And I called my local ER and asked them what they would do with me if I had to come in. And they said, we'll stick you in the ER. We're kind of full right now. So you might be in the waiting area or in a hallway for a really long time. And I said, so you just let me expose everyone? And they said, well, it's a droplet thing, so don't worry about it. And that had not been my experience with the prior coronavirus mutation that I'd seen, nor with what data we were seeing. And like I said, I now work in a genetics lab, and we were starting to get the data in from China so we could help potentially figure out like how to sequence this virus, how to figure out what it was. And so I refused to go in and basically told my husband, like just leave food at the door. I hold myself up in my room. Everybody else obviously got it anyway because my oldest. But she luckily was on a CPAP, so she was getting pressurized air. I was doing everything I could to improve my airway. And as a veterinary tech, I had a lot of experience with helping patients breathe, even if we didn't have all the right equipment for it. So I managed to keep myself going, not pass out, not end up in the hospital. But I never recovered. And after a while, um, when I should have been recovering, just walking to the end of my driveway and back to my house, I would have to sit on the couch for 3, 4 hours at a time just to try to like get my breath back, get my heart rate under control. Um, and 6 months later, I'm calling. We had a pulmonologist because we'd had a massive asbestos exposure. I'd lost 50% of my airway function even before COVID hit, because it was during a pregnancy and it was a larger dose exposure than most people experience in multiple lifetimes. Um,
Wow.
but so I was calling the pulmonologist saying, hey, either I'm still sick with this and I have post-viral illness, or I'm starting to experience the symptoms of asbestosis and I need it dealt with one way or another. And my test results from I was tested March 18th, and the test was sent to Georgia. It was one of the first tests of the pandemic. And it got lost, I guess. But so 5, 6 months down the road, I'm like, I really need to know what the test results were so that I can start getting treatment, and I need to get taken care of. Um, they had someone who claimed they were from the lab call me and say, good news, your test is negative. And I said, well, really? I'm still sick. So if it's not that, then it means I'm developing cancer. And she's like, wait, what? You're still sick? Nobody's supposed to be sick for more than 2 weeks. You're supposed to be better by now. And I'm like, okay, are you saying that I was positive? And she's like, well, I was hoping to just tell you it's negative by now, but I don't know. I didn't make this call. Bye. and hung up. So I called my doctor's office to figure out what was happening. And they swore they didn't know what I was talking about, but took my report of that phone call as the opportunity to write down that my test was negative. And so is something I've had to fight with on my chart since then. And the pulmonologist office ended up having a doctor who was running the local test site call me and yell at me for 2.5 hours that long COVID isn't real, that patients like me were what was wrong with the world, that we were all just trying to get out of work. I was working 40 hours a week, mostly from home at that point, um, but doing like microsurgery and stuff that this doctor doesn't do on a regular basis that is incredibly challenging. Um, and she was trying to tell me that I'm just lazy and just trying to get out of work. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to breathe and trying to figure out when I can get back to life as it was with my kids. Um, and didn't end up talking to that pulmonologist office for over 2 more years after that. Um, the primary doctor I had at the time took over 2.5 years to finally decide that she would diagnose me with ME/CFS after talking to her sister-in-law. Um, she said she didn't believe in COVID. I was fighting to get the long COVID diagnostic code put on my chart since it had just come out. And she said she didn't know whether or not it was real. And I said, but this is medical consensus enough that we have a diagnostic code. And she said she wasn't sure if that was just political and whether it counted. And so she didn't want to get sucked into that. So she talked about my case with her sister-in-law who has CFS. And so she was willing to diagnose me with chronic fatigue syndrome. And she didn't want to put anything about COVID on my chart. So I swapped to a new doctor within the same practice because trying to get care here is incredibly difficult. It took us over a year to get into that primary before COVID began. Um, and the new doctor said he didn't know anything about this, but he was willing to try to learn. It's been several more years, and he will send me referrals to some places, but to others, he just refuses to send it off, or I'm not sure if he even sent them, but he'll tell me the next time I see him, oh, they say they don't see long COVID patients. And the whole reason I'd asked to see that person is because I was told they do by a patient of theirs. Um, so I actually, from the very beginning, from the very first months, because I have this background, had been starting to work on connecting to patient support groups. So while I was still laid in bed, unable to move, I was searching the internet, trying to see who else was seeing this. I was talking to doctors and researchers on Twitter, trying to figure out COVID and what damage it was doing and the potential long-term implications. Because we have long-term implications for many viruses like measles and chickenpox, and like there's long-term things that occur with almost every major virus. Um, and so from the very beginning, I was involved in the pandemic, what is it, the patient research collaborative. Sorry, I'm forgetting the names of things, but I was involved in like 4 different groups, including Survivor Corps, and I now still moderate the C19 Long Haulers Advocacy Project pages on Facebook for Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. I am involved in WHN, which you've seen the video of. Um, and I'm doing everything I can to help locals in my area connect with what little medical care exists in the state of Maine, especially medical care that is willing to acknowledge that the condition we're dealing with is real, um, and willing to attempt any sort of medical care. My current provider says that he can't until he is handed a protocol for how to take care of me. And he expects that that'll be 10 years or so, and that I just need to wait. And meanwhile, I am starting to show him, because I'm also part of the NIH RECOVER project as a patient advocate. I'm showing him the research as it's released for public view, showing patients from that OG cohort are beginning to die of organ failure. And like, we don't have 10 years to wait to try anything. We have to start taking care of our symptoms and conditions now. So I've finally been sent down to Mass General for I have some form of dysautonomia going on. And I got a tilt table test and then got told that that doctor will no longer see long COVID patients. I've There's a long COVID clinic that's just started at Mass General, and I'm trying to get connected to it. But again, I have that faulty test from early on in the pandemic that doesn't officially say that I have COVID. Um, so it's really hard to get connected to anything, even though that is the one and only infection I've got. And part of how I was able to do that is we wear N95s everywhere. We avoid most of our social interaction, not only because I have trouble moving around and having energy to do anything, and I run a fever almost every single day, and like everything is a challenge. And with a child who can't get sick either without risk of death, everything has always been a challenge. But when we go anywhere, it's incredibly important to us that we wear N95s. We try to talk anybody who's interacting with us to also wear N95s. And we've done what we can to improve the indoor air quality in public spaces within our local area, including I got on my school board and made them assess their ventilation system. And when it was discovered that their air quality was so bad that they were making kids and teachers and staff sick constantly with how poor the air quality was, um, I got them to install a new one. And we went from something like 70% of students and staff sick at all times down to less than 30%. So it's a massive improvement just from getting ventilation into the school. And um, I still can't talk doctors into wearing masks, even doctors who acknowledge that if my kid gets sick, that they that she could die. Her doctors will say, but I'm a doctor, so I can't pass on illness, which doesn't make medical sense to me. And I know it is most likely just wishful thinking on their part because they don't want to think they might have had anything to do with any of the patients that have been lost. Um, Again, since my oldest is part of the Down syndrome community, people with Down syndrome are, oh, I'm forgetting the numbers, 8 times more likely to die of a COVID infection and over 30 times more likely to be hospitalized than their same age counterparts. And I have broken off contact with one of the Down syndrome clinics down in Boston because the doctor refused to acknowledge that data and said that he believed that even if it meant that a kid was going to die within a month because of exposure, he still thought it was better for them to not wear a mask and not take any precautions, to be a normal kid, and that 30 days of happiness was better than a life spent wearing a mask. And it's literally choosing to have a child die so that you can see their smile one time, because that means 30 days of illness. It's not. So we stopped going there because I can't deal with that. I'm the one who's had to sit next to my kid's bed before COVID. Since COVID, I haven't had to do this ever again since we mask constantly. But before COVID, every single time my kid got sick, or almost every single time, I'd be in the ER with her in a hospital bed, holding her hand while she's on oxygen, begging for her to take her next breath. And I don't ever want to do that again. And at this point, with how sick I am, I'm not sure how well I could survive that either. And I've caught doctors almost giving her the wrong medications. I've caught them like neglecting her. Her very first days in the NICU, she ended up neglected several times, and I had to report it up the chain. Like, and during COVID, talking to doctors, asking them if you had the choice between providing a ventilator to a 10-year-old child with Down syndrome or a 50-year-old man with a history of heart conditions, who does that bed go to? And they say the 50-year-old man because he's contributed to society, he's worked, and he has potential to work still, versus she will never give anything to society. So I know I can't trust any of the local doctors, and this is multiple doctors that I've asked this to. I can't trust any of them prioritize or think about my child's life. They all say just having Down syndrome is enough to say that her quality of life is poor, no matter how healthy she is. And so we've had to isolate, we've had to do everything we can to protect ourselves. And that's actually part of why I fixed indoor air quality in my local areas, because that decreases spread in my area and gives my family a better shot at survival if the people around me are healthier. But yeah, sorry, that's a lot, but
No, please don't apologize. This is definitely stuff that people need to hear, because when we were talking off video, I never would have thought of air quality in the school. I was a chemical lab technician for 15 years. I did have to wear the little badge in case something was released, but I never would have thought of it in the school. And which is sad because I think about it in my home because where I live, there's refineries, oil refineries, gas refineries all the way around us. And like me and you had talked about, but I just never thought about it being in the school, and it's very real. So that's another thing, that we need to think about. That, and then for the doctors to treat you the way they have, and to treat your daughter the way they have, I can't even imagine what you go through. And I appreciate you sharing that with us. I know, and I'll ask you about this too. Right now, I'm very hypersensitive to emotions. If somebody upsets me, it puts me in a crash and I go down for a couple days. So I can't imagine what you've been through to hear the doctors say that to you about your daughter, about yourself. And um, does that cause you to go into extra crashes when you get upset like that?
yeah. Sorry, I'm going to pop back slightly just to drop another statistic is we have lots of research showing 70% of all COVID infections from the first 2 to 3 years of the pandemic came through school-age children. So if we had better air quality in our schools, we might not have had and might not have now as severe of COVID spread as we do. Um, and then as far as like my emotions, yeah, like so post-exertional malaise includes not just physical labor, and physical labor can be as mild as sitting upright, but it also includes uh, thought labor. So when I tell people to um, rest and do radical rest, I do mean like don't pull out a Sudoku book and work on that. Don't craft with your hands. Like as much as a type A personality can't handle it, I literally mean like sit in a dark bed, cover your eyes if you can, do whatever you can to limit any sensory input and just like get into that meditory state of not thinking as much as possible. Like try to just cut it all out and let your body completely rest. Um, and then emotional exertion is the third one. And like I said, type A personality, I often call myself neurospicy, and one of the traits that I very much have is a fervor for justice. Um, so when someone around me is harmed, like I've been called a mama bear since I was a teenager. Um, like if I see somebody being hurt around me and there is any chance I can do anything, I'm taking care of it, which is part of why me as a bedbound, like every time I go down to one of these doctor's appointments with my kids or with myself, um, it is, and sorry, I say go down because most often we have to drive down to Boston, which is a 4 or 5 hour drive each way.
Oh, wow.
And so I have to get it done all in one day because I don't know that I'll be able to get out of bed the next day, and I can't risk getting stuck in a hotel that I can't get out of bed to go pay for. So it's get it all done in one day, get home, and then crash. Um, but part of why I am still so involved, like being in my school board, running all these moderator forums, all of it is because when I do have energy, I'm spending it where I can to help other people because it's who I am, and I can't live without that part of me, but it definitely, I assume it is part of why I still run a fever almost every day and why I am so exhausted. And like you'll hear through this interview, if you go back, my voice will slowly get more raspy and rattly because I am wearing out my vocal folds. Like doing any physical exertion, including talking, wears out my muscles much faster than it used to. Like just holding my arms up for too long is too much. So going and having to advocate for my kid, like I've had to advocate for her since she was born. And being able to be that fierce advocate was something that I got praised for by doctors. Like her cardiologist used to fight over who got to talk to me because I would teach them so much more than they knew. Because I could compare different species and all sorts of fun stuff. But now it's I go in and they just discount everything I say. And it's I'm less effective of an advocate because doctors don't believe in anything I say now that I am physically exhausted and I look exhausted. And if I bring up long COVID, they're like, "Oh, well, that's not real." So we have to educate our doctors, and it's something we're working on with Recover. At least the patient advocates are. We're trying to figure out how to spread more information and hopefully
Absolutely.
get all of us out of this cycle.
Absolutely. And, you know, my biggest thing about starting this YouTube channel is prior to doing so, I didn't know anybody else with long haul COVID. So when I went to the doctors, like you said, you know, I didn't never got anybody saying it wasn't real, but I got the blank stare, you know, as soon as I started talking. Hey, since I had COVID in January of 21, this is how I was, you know, how it made me feel. This is what happened afterwards. Yes, I had the first two COVID shot or vaccines or whatever that was. Do I think that caused it? I don't know, you know, and somebody had questioned the videos why I don't ask people if they think it caused it. Well, because I really don't think the vaccine is what originally caused mine. I think it was the original infection that I couldn't walk for 6 days. Because once I got better, that pain lingered and it's gotten just worse over time. And I have to use a electric wheelchair over a certain amount of steps, you know, and stuff like that. But do I think the vaccine did it? I can't say that for sure because I had that infection that did that to me. You know, do you mind if I ask, were you vaccinated
I mean, I
or
got
are
sick
you?
over a year before the vaccine existed. I got sick in March 2020. Um,
Right.
and we didn't have the ability to get a vaccine until April of 2021. And we jumped on that as fast as we could. Um, this is another place that if you search through my Twitter history, you'll see I'm arguing with people on there spreading lies about the mRNA vaccine nature. Because again, I work in a genetics lab. I work with actual like genetic editing. And if the way that people want to say mRNA affected DNA occurred, my job would either be impossible or we would all accidentally be editing our DNA by just walking around and breathing air. Like it's not it's not possible. It's not how anything works. Um, and so like and I had been watching the development of this mRNA vaccine technology for Zika virus and for certain cancers. I mean, imagine being able to go into a doctor's office and have a blood sample taken so that they can analyze your cancer cells, the DNA of your cancer, and they could figure out how to target it, develop an mRNA vaccine, and give you that and have it kill your cancer off. You could be cured of cancer in less than like a month. It would be amazing. And we were this close. And they were developing an HIV vaccine that is based on mRNA. Like, this is a miracle. And we've got people spreading lies about how it works to terrify people to the point where it's getting defunded. And potential cures for HIV and for cancer, certain types of cancers, and for Zika virus are disappearing. And so people are getting sick who don't need to be because of lies that people are spreading. And the fact that they're making money off of this while people die is just abhorrent to me. So there are people who I think, like, this is my personal theory, and there's not a way to prove this, is I would believe that there are people who got infected with COVID while they were going to get vaccinated, because most of the people I talk to don't wear masks even when going to get vaccinated. Or they had a COVID infection beforehand, and then getting a vaccine shortly afterwards is enough for their immune system that's already on the fritz because COVID damages your immune system, for their immune system to say, okay, nope, can't recover now. And so I would be willing to believe that getting a vaccine within a certain window or at a certain time point of your immune compromise is enough to exacerbate those long-term symptoms. But do I think the vaccine could cause it all by itself without an infection? I'm not convinced of that. I haven't seen the data for it. That doesn't mean it's not possible, but I'm going to say I think there needs to be more nuance than the vaccine totally did this to me, because I think there's got to be more information there based on what we know about the vaccines. And we do know that some of these people did get sick because they got a certain version of the vaccine, not the mRNA, but one of the AstraZenecas that did have that spike protein that did cause misfolding proteins. But it was shortly pulled off the market. And we do know some young kids did develop, some young men developed cardiac, sorry, lost the words, swollen heart, can't think of the right word, but where they ended up getting an effect, but it was temporary and it went away in every single case. And there's lots of cases that people try to pull and connect to it, but if you actually like look them up, that's not what happened. And so but it's hard to convince people after they've been spreading a story for 2 years to go back and actually look at the facts of the case. And so I would not be surprised if the vaccine had some effect, but I don't think it's the whole story. And I think the
I
benefits that we
apologize.
could
My
get,
phone.
I think the benefits we could get out of continuing work on mRNA vaccines far outweigh the risks that we know about from research. And and so I would rather we did more work in developing these further and actually investigating what is happening, um, rather than what I'm sometimes seeing is people who are sure that this is vaccine induced, saying that they refuse to be tested to see if they ever were infected, because they don't want that to be the case. And that's not how science works. And it's not how we're going to find answers.
Right, absolutely. Now, um, I'm going to back up just a little bit. You talked about a long haul COVID clinic just starting in your area. Where I'm at, there was 4 clinics. I was a part of one until about 5 months ago, and I found out 3 months ago that they closed down. That's where my cardiologist is, my pulmonologist, the internal medicine doctor, you name it. And they were all super sweet, and I loved them to death. It really breaks my heart that they're not there anymore, but the care has changed too. Once they went back to wherever they are, I love my pulmonologist. I sent him a message when I found out about it. I'm like, hey, are you still my doctor? And he's like, yeah, you're still my patient, but I'm not getting the same care. I sent him that message, and it was a week later that I got that. And then 2 weeks after that, I was back in the hospital. I had 2 episodes of chest pain. And at that time, he had told me that he thinks that my lungs were inflamed. So when he sent me steroids. So I went back to the hospital with chest pain again. The steroids, I think I had 2 days left. And basically, they sent me home with pain medicine. And I reached out to my PCP and I was like, look, I'm not feeling any better. I'm still having this chest pain. And she said it was bronchitis. But still, to this day, I still haven't heard from my pulmonologist. And that was over 2 weeks ago. So the care has changed. What I did find out, the 4 clinics that were open, there's only one left. And in that one, there's one physician. When I called to make a new patient appointment there 2 months ago, the new patient or the appointment was October 2026. And I think that is very devastating. But I understand at the same time that people don't know that these clinics even existed, and that's why they're closing. So I don't know how we can get those back or if that's even a thing. Because once they close, I don't know if, it, and it's I didn't mind going there, even though, we're all learning this together. But I felt like they were, that was specifically what they were doing. And it's possibly still could be what they're doing. But with it being closed, it's just harder to tell because the care has changed. So I've been looking for new doctors. I do ask them when I call, hey, does your doctor, any of your doctors, know anything about long haul COVID? I did find a good pulmonologist that does know, and that was cool. He's closer to me than where I was going anyway, and I'm trying to find a pulmonologist right now. But other than that, it is hard. It's hard to find doctors that really, really make you feel like they understand. And I'm not trying to bash any doctor in any way, shape, or form. I'm not a doctor. I've never been medical. I can't imagine what their lives entitle because I know how busy it is for me working 40 hours a week, and I know they work more than that. So I can't imagine much time for research or whatever. So again, I'm not trying to bash them in any way, shape, or form. I just I can
I
relate. I can relate with the. Go ahead.
so Maine actually did have a long COVID clinic for a very brief window. I think it was back in 2021 and 2022. Basically, it opened, they started intaking patients. I got on their wait list so that they would call me back to schedule an appointment within 6 months. And then I got called back about 3 months later and told, hey, we're closing down. So there's no point in scheduling this appointment. Um, Good luck finding care elsewhere. Apparently, our governor went out and said, acknowledged people were developing long COVID, long-term symptoms, and she said that primary care providers were the very best people to handle those cases. Every primary care doctor I knew said, we don't know what the hell this is. We don't want to deal with it. And so we were hoping to pass them all off to this clinic that might actually pay attention and know what it is so we could just treat normal people. Um, and now I'm hearing from the primary care providers I know that like for the last 2 years they've tried to say, oh, it's pretty rare, but now they're finally acknowledging it's a lot of their patients that are developing these symptoms. And they're seeing it basically like in almost every patient that there is some sort of fallout of a COVID infection. Um, and like I got sent to a cardiologist though, who when I explained that my tachycardia developed after a COVID infection, he said, oh, I'm not sure I believe that COVID is a problem because I've had it 9 times and I'm totally fine. And then he twitched. So like like he was not okay. I don't know how to explain to him that he was not okay, but he was not an okay person. Um, but like people are willing to fool themselves into anything. And I am told that there is a doctor who moved here and is trying to set up a new long COVID clinic at one of our smallest hospital systems. I am told some people are getting in to see him, but when I talk to them afterwards, it sounds like they're instead being referred to a local naturopath, um, which if that's helping them, cool. For the most part, these are wealthier folks, so when they get a script for low dose naltrexone or something, they're able to fill it. But anybody who's not on the wealthier side says that that was a completely useless appointment because they can't get anything out of that without paying out of pocket and they can't afford that. Um, and then the long COVID clinic down in Boston is a newer development. They are supposed to be a branch of the RECOVER initiative. Um, And we have seen some really good research come out of there. I have not figured out how to actually get into the clinic. I keep hearing they're recruiting patients, but every time I look, they're not. So I'm not sure how to get into it, but I know I have referred a couple of patients from Maine down there who've been able to get in. But it seems like it's mostly Massachusetts folks who can. That's in part because people with long COVID often are bedbound or have limited energy. And so getting several hours away to Massachusetts is incredibly difficult. And Maine has some peculiar virtual care laws that make it really difficult to get virtual care from the state of Maine. And that was
Oh,
allowed under emergency exemptions before, but now that that emergency status has ended, apparently exterior hospital systems are just cutting off the state of Maine. So patients here are basically cut off from almost all access to care, um, unless they are wealthy enough to afford special exemptions.
I thought an hour and a half drive was bad one way. I can't imagine 5 hours. That was another reason why I changed my doctors to be closer because by the time I got home, that was an hour and a half drive, then waiting for the appointment. If I didn't have somebody to drive me, I was falling asleep. Yeah, it's a lot. Now, you just mentioned naltrexone. I was taking it for about 3 years. I'm not wealthy. It was covered by my insurance, so I don't know how all that works or whatever. But
Not here.
um, I actually weeded myself off of it. I just wanted to see what was actually working. At one point, they had me on like 30 different medicines. Here, try this, try the naltrexone, try metformin. I wasn't diabetic, but it was something that they had saw that was helping. Um, they had me on muscle relaxers, and forgive me as I start to slur, same thing.
Yeah.
Um, so they started me on muscle relaxers. So I started weeding myself off because at one point I felt like a walking zombie. Like I couldn't walk to the bathroom and back without being extremely tired. And I was like, something, I was like, let me just look at these pills first. So I'd write it all down and then I wrote down all the side effects. And I started with all the stuff that said caused fatigue. And I weaned myself off of all that because I wanted to see if it really helped. Of course, I kept this stuff for my heart. I kept the high cholesterol medicine. I don't have high cholesterol, but I have many veins in my brain, and that's why that was prescribed. I have a thyroid condition, so I kept that medicine. The stuff that was important, I kept. The stuff that they were telling me, oh, we're going to try this, I took off. Nothing made me, it didn't change anything. So I stopped taking all of it. And I told my doctors, I said, I don't feel any different. I wasn't as tired. I said, now I can walk to the bathroom and back and actually sit down and have a conversation. Might be a short one, but at least I can do that without having to lay down and sleep. So it did make the tiredness a little bit better. I'm still, don't get me wrong, I still get really tired, but I'm not a zombie anymore. So that's just my experience with the naltrexone. I didn't feel like it helped at all.
We
Um,
for on the
go ahead.
research side, it is one of the medications that seems to have uh, more effect. Like it seems to help more people, but it doesn't help everybody.
Right.
But anything that helps over 50% of us is definitely worth looking at. Um, Typically, the doses that are used for long COVID are what they call low dose naltrexone. So it has to be compounded, and many
Yeah.
insurance companies don't cover compounded medications. So for most people, that becomes
Uh,
inaccessible if you have to pay like $60 a month or more to try to get one of your medications. Just
Actually, I think I lied to you and not on purpose, but I think you're absolutely right. I did have to pay for it. And it was like $120 for 3 months. Now that I'm remembering, it was I yeah, that was hard to do, but you're right. It was a compound. Now I remember.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that I felt like. after I stopped taking it, it didn't change. So that put that back in the pocket, of course.
The clinic
I'm
down at Boston did, I recently started a new medication. So prior to about 6 months ago, I've just been on medication for blood pressure, which is again one of those things where I had incredibly high blood pressure that just kept rising for over 2 years, and the doctors and nurses just refused to chart it because they said I just had white coat syndrome, and that if my blood pressure was as high for real as what they were getting, then they should send me to the ER because I'm at risk of stroke. And so I bought myself a blood pressure machine and started taking blood pressure at home, and it was the same. So I said, okay, it's not white coat syndrome. And they said, well, we don't trust home machines. So finally, I had to, nurse takes my blood pressure at the start of appointment, leaves, doctor comes in, and before he says anything else, I said, hey, can you tell me what she wrote down for my blood pressure? Because I've had 6 nurses now tell me that if my blood pressure is accurate, I should be referred for further care. And he said, oh, that's strange. It doesn't say anything. It says normal. And so I threatened a lawsuit unless they like recorded my blood pressure and then acted accordingly. So finally I was able to get blood pressure medication. Um, and then I was given a tachycardia medication. They kept trying to give me things for anxiety, but those made the tachycardia much worse, like to the point where I was terrified that my heart was gonna stop. Um, and so finally I got on good meds for over a year and then got down to Boston, to the dysautonomia clinic, and she was willing to try I think it's called Pyrostigm. It's not in front of me, so I can't remember how it's spelled.
I
Um,
took that too. Yeah.
and she said it seems to be helping with the energy crisis. One of the things we know, again, from research is that if they take muscle tissue samples from patients with long COVID, our Krebs cycle is failing, which is how you get sugars turned into energy. So instead of kicking off 3 ATP, which is the unit of energy our body uses, we're kicking off 1, which means we burn through what little energy we have much faster. And so this medication is supposed to help us utilize ATP more efficiently. There's a couple of other medications that are out there that supposedly help you kick off 2 ATP instead of just 1, but this is the one she chose to give me. And I don't know how much it's helping. What it seems to be doing is masking my symptoms. So I think I am still having all of my exact same symptoms and fatigue, but now I'm not noticing the sensations that lead up to them until I go to lift my hand and realize I can't because the muscles are so exhausted, I physically can't lift my arm. So in a way, I think it's actually more dangerous for me to not have those warning signs of, hey, you're not doing okay today. You should rest more until I get to crash point. So, in ways, it's good because it means I can interact with my kids a little more. I can be a little more upbeat and vibrant with them. But it also means I think I'm pushing myself too hard easier. So, I'm having to, even though I don't feel as exhausted or feel those warning signs, I'm having to cut back even before they happen. And I'm not sure whether that's for good or bad. So there's a lot of medications we're trying. Um, and
Right.
there's
And I
oh,
tried that one, and that was another one of those that I stopped. Now, I'm going to back up to something that you said that is very important, and we're going to elaborate on it. Okay. Just because it works for one person does not mean it works for somebody else. I always want to tell people, please check with your doctor before you try something else. The the unfortunate part is, what do we do when our doctors aren't listening, right? I pray and hope people are being very careful before they take something new. And I know there's lots of stuff out there about new supplements and everything. And I understand. I'm all for all natural supplements. Yes, I do oils to try to help me feel better and stuff like that. It's just with this being so new, it's sometimes scary when it comes to people just saying, hey, you need to try this. It worked for me, or "Hey, you need to try this." So I just talking me and you, and because you said that, I know you know how important it is to be careful with what you take.
Yeah, so there's two things that I typically tell people is first off, like as much as long COVID is new, a lot of the symptoms we're facing are not. There's an entire group of people who had ME/CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis, or chronic fatigue syndrome, and they have had it for decades. It was actually like a feature of one of the story arcs on the Golden Girls. Like this has been around for a very long time. And so we do have people who can lead us down pathways, at least to an extent, and say, hey, after 30 years of fatigue, this is the one thing that seemed to make me feel a little bit better. And I worked with my doctor to figure out like what dose was best for me. The other advice that I often give follows that of saying, anytime you want to start something new, talk to your doctor. And the thing that they keep doing to me is just saying, just try this and no more information. But what you need to do is say, hey, how do I know if this is working? And how do I know if I need to stop it? And what do I need to do if I do need to stop it? And what is the worst possible side effect that is acceptable? And what is like, so that way you know, like, if this is working, what am I watching out for? And if it's not working or if it's harmful, what am I watching out for? And there are doctors who will try to tell me, oh, I don't want to tell you about the bad things because you might be like a hypochondriac and make those things happen. And I'm like, yeah, but if those bad things happen and I don't know about them, since long COVID comes with symptoms that wax and wane and new ones pop up all the time, how am I going to know whether it's just my long COVID doing what it does or a side effect of this medication that is something to watch out for unless you tell me and write it down for me so I can remember after I drive 4 hours home. So,
Absolutely.
so
I know.
that's what I recommend.
They absolutely. The doctors always ask me, "Do you want me to print you out the aftercare summary?" Absolutely not. I've got it in my chart and I read them. I don't want the extra
My
paper because
doctors
then that means
refuse.
cleaning.
My doctor
Uh,
refused to log things in my chart. They refused to write things down. It is an incredible problem. And it's like literally 18 months of my medical chart from my first doctor disappeared. Don't exist
oh
anymore.
my goodness.
So
I am
because
so
they didn't
sorry.
want me to be able to chart that, oh, she did have this high blood pressure and it was ignored. She was coming to us with symptoms and it was ignored. So the chart just disappeared. So
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
And I go to a new doctor and I go see them and they're like, "I'm so sorry, but I need some time to look at your chart." I understand there's a lot in there from the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and then include cancer on top of it. And then you have, you know, I've had COVID probably about 5 or 6 times. I don't know exactly. I don't remember. Each time was being at the hospital. You have to unmask so they can do a test or whatever. Or I go in for a colonoscopy and come out sick. Unfortunately, I don't blame anybody. This is all horrible, first and foremost, but I do the best I can. I don't mask when I go in public because it's hard for me to breathe. And I know that's horrible, but with the lung issue I already have, and I don't go out in public often. I go to the doctor and I'll mask at the doctor's because I don't want to take that added chance. And then once in a blue moon, I might go to the store, and it's just a quick in and out because I am scared of germs and stuff. But I just I can't breathe with the masks on.
Can I help you a little bit? Like
Please,
I'm brightening
yes.
up over this. So like I said, I lost 50% of my lung function after asbestos exposure while I was pregnant. And this is pre-COVID, so I was already magic unicorn. I had a child with Down syndrome at age 26, gave birth to her at home because they sent me home on sleep aids, so I gave birth at home hallucinating to a child with Down syndrome who survived that. Anyway, and then got asbestos exposure during my third pregnancy and lost lung function, which again is never supposed to happen. And then now I was one of the first patients to develop long COVID. So I had to look for the most breathable mask possible, um, because have trouble just moving air as is. And then I have young children. And so I needed a mask that they could breathe through. So the first thing I did was like do a bunch of research myself, but I ran across Aaron Collins, the mask nerd, on YouTube, Twitter, elsewhere. And he has all these fabulous videos and charts with videos of him trying on masks with a porta tester so he can show you like how breathable they are and how protective they are. And he shows them on his face. And when he can, he gets people with different shaped faces to come try them on as well so that you can see like how well they fit different faces. And I have a very equine face, very large nose, high cheekbones. I'm native. And so I needed a face that could fit a giant head with extreme features. And all of my kids have giant heads, but that was also really breathable. And the most breathable respirator on the market is, sorry, this is my mess. We're moving things around for Christmas, is the 3M V-Flex. That's not going to show, is it? Ugh. Anyway, it's a 3M V-Flex, and it's the 1804s, is the medical version that has splash guard, and then the 9105 is the super breathable one. And it comes in a regular size, which fits people with giant heads really well and extreme facial features, or the 9105 small, which fits most people, including kids. And because it has such low air resistance, like air can passively pass through really quickly. So it doesn't heat up, but it's still an N95. So you still have protection from pathogens. It looks a little silly because it's got these little wings on it. Um, but that's what I wear for 8 to 10 hour shifts at work. When I've had to sleep over in the hospital so my kid could get a sleep apnea test, I sleep in those at the hospital. Um, they don't build up sweat near as fast, so I recommend them to people who are exercising and working out. But they also, because the shape of them isn't like the standard boat shape mask, the 3M 9205 is these, I don't know how well that'll appear on camera. There you go. That standard boat shape mask, like these have a flat front, so your hot air blows right back on your face. And people who have sensory difficulties find that incredibly hard to deal with, and it can make you feel claustrophobic and make it harder for you to breathe. But the 9105, if I have one close to me, is a different shape. Um, and so it's got a deeper cup and it's shaped rounded. And since air passes through it so quickly, heat can just rise out of it. You don't get hot air blown back on your face. So even on 100+ degree days, I can wear it without my face getting so hot and sweaty, unless I'm like working out or something. Not that I do that anymore, but walking from my car to work, that's what I call working out nowadays.
Right, absolutely.
But that mask has like helped all of my friends with sensory issues, people who are on the autistic spectrum, like especially have sensory issues. Um, and like for anybody who's asthmatic or has lung conditions, that 9105 is, it's everything. Like the ability to breathe is amazing. Um,
I have wrote it down and I'm as soon as we're done, I am going on there and ordering some because I hate going out. Like that's why I don't go out in public often and only in if I have to. But I hate it because I don't have anything to cover. And then any of the masks that we've used, I can't breathe and I get that sweaty and it's like
so
once I start sweating, that's it. You know, I then I really can't breathe. I'm sure you know
yeah.
how that is.
Yeah, because it
So I
clogs the pores on the mask. Yeah, so you can't
yeah,
breathe. But
yeah, I
the
really
other thing to
appreciate that.
do is look for your local mask block. Um, and it's typically spelled BLOC, no K at the end. Often they will end up having like sample kits of a whole bunch of different masks, so you can try them out and see what works for you. Um, and it may be that the best, like you need a fashionable enough mask that the only thing you can stand is a KN95, which is just the ear loops. Personally, I can't do that because my ears hurt because my face is too big, so they pull too much.
I
Um,
have that problem too, yes.
but so I prefer the head straps. And I just wear my hair like this every day. So, um, but wearing a mask that fits you and fits into your life, any mask is better than none. Um, but a great protective mask like the 9105 is a game changer as far as being able to avoid illness. And we have a bunch of research showing that 1 in 10 hospital-acquired COVID infections leads to death. So it's as much as doctors like to say that they are not passing infection, we know the consequences of when they do, or when their patients do, or when their hospitals do. The consequences are really steep, and so we need to get doctors on board to be our advocates. And yeah, like the more we can do to normalize wearing masks to protect yourself, especially when we're in high COVID waves like we are right now, and with bird flu tapping on the door to spread into humans, it's really important that we're doing everything we can to protect ourselves from respiratory pathogens.
Absolutely. No, I'm even more glad that I brought that up because that has been, a concern. But when I go on and I look for, everybody says that, certain masks, but when I've tried those, I still can't breathe.
Right.
And I'm very excited. And I'm gonna make sure I highlight that in your video too, so that people know where to go. And I'll see if I can find a link so, they can have that too, because it is very important. I know my family, it's a big stink about masks. They won't wear them. That's okay. But I'm going to wear them. And especially now that I hopefully will find one I can breathe in, because it's been, that's been the hardest thing, is not being able to breathe. Even when I go to um, a well-known hospital for cancer, they have the regular masks. It's just, the generic or whatever. And we've tried many different ones, so I'm definitely going to try this and see, because that will help out tremendously, I know.
Another option, if you need to be able to go to the hospital and not take off your mask and want a really good excuse, there are stick-on ones called Ready masks, that it's just a giant sticker on the backside. They're reasonably breathable, not quite as reasonable as a V-Flex, so I can't get away with wearing this for an 8-hour work shift. But if you need to go to the dentist's office, this is a mask you can wear just over your nose and leave your mouth exposed to get dental care. And there's videos on YouTube for how to do it. But this literally just folds over your nose, and then, sorry, without the sticker to hold it in place, it's hard. But it just folds up, and my kid says you look like a duck. So
Hey, I'll do the duck.
yeah, but it's one I can put on her, and when doctors say, "Hey, could you take off your mask so I can see your smile, sweetie?" and they just want to have her take off her mask for like 10 minutes, I'm like, "No, she can't. She can't take that off." So if you need to know something about her mouth, I took photos. Here you go. Or if you really need to see inside her mouth, I have a spare mask that she can trade into. And I need you to be wearing an N95 as of half an hour ago and to have ventilation in this room. And I have a portable filter that I bring with me, one of the large ones, that can clear a small room out in about 15 minutes. So like I said, it's my kid's life, so I take everything incredibly serious, and do the best I can.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. And I feel like that's probably why I've secluded myself and everything too, and only go out if I have to. I don't do anything extra because
I
of that
mean,
reason.
that hurts too, because like we just
Yeah,
had Christmas and we had family trying to invite us for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. And they were like, "Come on, can't you come now? It's been years since the pandemic." And I'm like, "Well, first off, it's still happening. We're actually in the middle of a wave right now, our 12th wave. And we can't come unless you guys are willing to mask for 2 weeks straight everywhere in public you go." And since you're not willing to do it, knowing that it's a matter of life or death for two members of my family, if you can't do that, then we can't come to Christmas. Like that's how that works. And it sucks that they value not masking more than our lives. But
right. Yeah, that's very scary. Um, so I ask everybody this, and I'm just curious. It sounds like you have a lot of support. How within, no, no, okay, so I apologize for thinking that, but let me ask you about your husband. How does he treat you, or compared to, is it the same as it was before? At first, when you started getting sick, was he believing you? And I think so, because of your job that you've done.
Yeah.
But after that, I also want you to talk about your friends or your family. How do they treat you different? Because it definitely sounds like you're asking for something that they may not be willing to do, right? So how do they treat you, and then how does that make you feel as maybe husband and wife, not being able to do all this stuff?
Um, so it's worth stepping back even further in time. Um, right after my husband and I were married, and actually while we were dating, but for several years, I the biggest complaint I had about my husband is he's a wonderful man, but he can't see past the nose on his face. So it has to directly impact him before he noticed it. But we had our child with Down syndrome, and at 8 months old, she had her first heart surgery, and I could not get him to talk to me about it. And like, to be fair, his boss was murdered. We had our house nearly explode and nearly kill our baby. Like, we had a lot of stuff happening. Um, and
You're
so
so
when I got in the car at 8 months old with my infant daughter to drive her down to heart surgery, I didn't think he was coming with us. And so as I start up the car and start to back out, he runs out of the house and jumps in with bare feet and says, "Why are you going without me?" I'm like, "You didn't make any indication you cared." And he's like, "Of course, it's my kid." And I was like, "Well, you gotta show it." And he made an effort after that point to do what he could to show. And it's still been a problem, but there's been these huge learning and growing steps. And so when I got sick, like, he doesn't want to take care of this family by himself. Like, that was the deal when we first got together is I have incredibly bad luck. Like, if something can go wrong, it goes wrong in horrific ways.
Me too. Me too.
And he is one of those guys that whenever he walked into a house party, there might not have been a door prize, but there is now, and he just won it. Like, that is the type of luck he has. And I warned him, like, things will go bad, just so you know. So if you're hitching your ride to me, you are stuck forever. And like, there's no walking away. Like, you just have to learn and grow. And he's done that. He's been amazing about it. So he watched me get sick, and he had to sit and listen to me tell him when I first got sick, like with the very first initial COVID infection, when I said, "Hey, if you walk in and I'm non-responsive, that's when you take me to the hospital. I'm not going before then." And like, that's the first lesson he got out of the pandemic. Um, and he's watched, like, he's had to be there with my kid when we had to call an ambulance out to the house to get her breathing again because we couldn't safely transport her to the hospital because we couldn't keep her breathing. So he's had to be there for all of these incredibly stressful moments that became growing moments for him. He watches me struggle to like do the farm chores, knowing that our house was destroyed and the only thing we were able to keep was our goats. And I refuse to give them up even now when I can barely like take care of their chores. He's taken on their chores. Um, and the school has refused to take any precautions and says they have no obligation to protect kids from getting sick. So we have been denied FAPE for our kids. So we've been forced into homeschooling. So he's the one who's there for them during classes most of the time since I'm at work. Like, he has taken on so much, and he knows exactly how real it is because he's watched his wife and kid almost die. So this is as real for him as for anybody. And that's one of the things we struggle with is doctors don't respond seriously and well to me, and a lot of it seems to be misogyny. So there's this feeling that if he could go with me and be like, sorry, this is where I get crude, but this is the most extreme example is we're like, hey, doc, I can't have sex with my wife because she doesn't have enough energy. Fix her so that I can get my jollies on. Like maybe that might work. Maybe that would be what it takes for a doctor to take me seriously, is if a man is saying he can't have the thing he wants most in life without me being fixed. Like maybe that's what it would take. But he's got to stay home and take care of the kids when I go to the doctor. So he can't
Right.
be there. And so like he is it. He is my support. That and my absolute stubbornness to let to just sit and do nothing and not try and fight for a better world. Because I've got three little girls who deserve the world. And it's
Yes.
not
Yes,
gonna
indeed.
get better for them unless I do something because nobody else is. So I am burning myself out. I am burning myself to the ground. But as much as I can share the word and let people know this is real and how much it hurts, like even though I know this will likely make me near bedbound the next several days, like just doing this interview, and I know it's not necessarily visible for anybody who's watching this who doesn't share this condition, but the risk I take in doing these interviews and in trying to share my passion for why it matters is the only way that I have to change the world so that my kids have a chance of someday getting to emerge out of our house and going out into the world and being part of society again. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it takes a lot. And somebody had asked me, if you're so tired all the time, why are you taking on a project like this? I
yeah,
run a nonprofit. I did run a nonprofit. It's still running thanks to volunteers. Um, my passion is to help people too. And it hurts me not being able to run my nonprofit the way I did. And I might have to take a nap once we're done, but it's worth it to me, and I think that's why we had both said we're tired. I had done some interview or two interviews yesterday, and I was just tired to begin with, but it's worth it to me. I'll come on here and I'll interview you because it's worth it for other people to see they're not alone. They're not, I didn't know anybody prior to doing any of this. So it's refreshing to me in a not not in a happy way, any way, shape, or form, but it's refreshing to me to hear other people going through this. I wish none of us had to do it, and I think that's the hardest thing was not knowing anybody else and people trying to be there to support me. But unless you don't know what to say. Even my mom would tell you, I've watched you go through this, but I don't know how to help you. Sometimes just having somebody to talk to that's going through the same thing or listening to an actual person, not reading messages, really makes a difference.
yeah,
And I really, really want to thank you for making that difference, for doing what you're doing. I'm sorry that you're exhausting yourself to do it, but I'm grateful that you're doing it because you're right. Our children deserve better. Mine are all well, I have a 19-year-old and then a 24 and 26-year-old. So they're older. But we didn't have this when they were younger. My youngest had the swine flu at 3, and that was hard. And then we've had the chicken pox after vaccines. It still happens. And then they have issues with their cycles and stuff like that, that we constantly have to go to the doctors for. And it's nothing compared to what you have in any way, shape, or form. But you're strong, and I'm proud of you. And I'm sure people have told you that before, and from a stranger to a new friend, I'm proud of you. And if you ever need somebody to talk to, I'll be here for you. Absolutely. What would be, if you could pick one thing for the best advice to give to anybody else going through this fight and trying to stay strong for their families and still continue to work or whatever they have to do, what is your number one advice that you would give to them?
Um, in the shortest version, it's get mad and do something. Like, so I work at a research facility that was instrumental in figuring out genetics for COVID um, and figuring out who was most susceptible. And they slowly got rid of all precautions. And so I started my workplace's disability and chronic illness employee resource group, which basically was a support group for anybody with disabilities in my workplace. Because of that, I've been able to build connections between people with different disabilities at work, and they've been able to support each other and make connections that they wouldn't have otherwise. I've been able to help connect them to more doctors than they could have otherwise because they can talk to each other. Um, I became part of each of the various long COVID groups on each of the different platforms I was on so that I can keep making those connections, keep finding ways to help each other and share the word between things. But almost all of that I could do from my bed. And like it is mental and emotional exertion, but it's the little bit I could do with what energy I had. And when I had successes and saw people able to survive, like that's part of what fueled me even before COVID began. Um, and it still fuels me now is to be able to help people and make those connections and be mad that people aren't doing things, but then go fix it. Do what you can, even if it's just a tiny bit, even if it's just reaching a hand out to a friend who's dealing with long COVID and doesn't know what to do. Let them know you saw something like this. Let them know about the Reddit COVID forums. Let them know about the Facebook COVID groups. Let them know about whatever it takes for them to find other people and get connected. And then if you are someone who's not dealing with this, listen to them. Let them tell you what's going on. Because with our brain fog and the constant, like, painful static going on up there, sometimes you'll hear something that they didn't manage to tell the doctor because they were too tired. And maybe you can help them.
Absolutely.
So, like, get mad, do something, make the world better.
Absolutely. Miss Crystal, I just want to thank you one more time for being brave enough to come in and talking to us and for all of your hard work from the school to COVID awareness, from sharing where to find the right masks. I really appreciate everything. And I learned from you guys just like I don't know that you learn much from me at this point because I am absolutely learning from everybody else stuff that I try to research and there's just so much, and where to start and all that. So I really, really appreciate it. And thank you again for coming on through Glass Eyes. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, but we'll talk a little bit more, okay?
Thanks.